Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi!
Hello friends. You've probably noticed this ad floating around whatever social media site you're using. Obviously Snowprint commissioned it and it looks awesome, but it also showcases a lot of the abilities for the upcoming characters. As a result, we are allowed to bring you our character showcases earlier than the usual non-disclosure agreement dictates. So today we'll cover the Lord of Death himself, Mephiston. You know my format for the character showcases by now. We'll start by taking a look at the character himself and his kit. Then we'll look at his abilities and discuss some nuances and corner case scenarios before concluding with an infographic and where the character might do well. Sadly, this early showcase still doesn't allow me to confirm the legendary release event requirements, so that will have to wait till later. Everything is timestamped, so without further ado. I'll never get tired of complimenting the art department for the phenomenal work they do. Mephiston looks like he has had the premium treatment and it really shows. He has two traits, none of which are new to us. Mephiston has the Psyker trait and the Terrifying trait. The stats on screen are at Diamond 3. I'll take a closer look later on to show you how this compares to other characters in the game. Mephiston has a base movement of 3. He has both a Psychic melee and a ranged attack. This gives him 100% pierce and 2 hits at range and 3 hits at melee. Mephiston's active ability is called the Quickening. He targets a hex within 2 hex range and moves there. If there is a friendly unit on that hex, then it swaps places with Mephiston's previous location. All Blood Angels moving this way also perform a melee attack, dealing a proportion of their damage. This doesn't trigger Overwatch, and Mephiston cannot target friendly units that are in deep strike. His passive ability is called Fury of the Ancients. After moving, this does psychic damage to an adjacent enemy and an additional enemy adjacent to the initial target. The debuff lasts for 2 rounds, and while it's on, enemies cannot recover health nor be revived. This passive triggers at the end of Mephiston's turn if he hasn't moved. These are probably fairly difficult things to conceptualize exclusively through text, so let's look at the gameplay. We can start with the simple stuff. His active ability is essentially an extra move too. If you use it at the start of his turn, then it ends Mephiston's turn. However, if you use it after Mephiston has moved, you can effectively increase his movement from 3 to 5. It is a movement, not a teleport, as you can see from these 2 screenshots side by side. It doesn't let him teleport through terrain. Fine, fairly straightforward. You'll also notice that the text says that Blood Angels also attack when moving in this way. There is another Blood Angels unit in this patch. When you combine Mephiston with Matineo, you can effectively make Matineo charge again, and this can summon 4 intercessors in 1 turn. In this clip, we can focus on Mephiston's passive. You can see here how this sort of ethereal form of Mephiston applies the passive effect to both Tyrant Guard and Isabella. I'm going to rewind that and freeze frame to see the numbers. It looks like the damage is dealt to the 2 characters, but also, at least initially, Isabella's passive seems to work. The order of operations seems to be that you apply the damage and then you apply the debuff effect. Once the debuff is in place, you can see the marker under each character's card. Isabella is therefore unable to heal herself or Tyrant Guard. You can combine Mephiston's active with his passive. Mephiston moves and applies the passive debuff to 2 units, and then moves again through his active and applies the passive debuff again. Isabella works in a funny way. It turns out her active is coded as a resurrection, so this means that it can still resurrect characters that have been killed while affected by Mephiston's passive. I suspect that we will get a wording update on Isabella's active to this effect. Not being able to revive a unit applies to characters who have passives like Incisus and Rotbone. Mephiston's active is designed to be used with Blood Angels. As we've already highlighted, the only other Blood Angel in the game at the moment is Matineo. Matineo's active suggests that it can only be used if he hasn't moved. However, as you can see in this clip, it doesn't look like Mephiston moving Matineo stops the latter's active. This has been confirmed as bugged by the developers and will be fixed before the first tournament arena. Mephiston's passive also prevents mechanical units being healed, even though the wording that they use is repair. Actus's entire kit is based around repairing targets in order to let them take extra attacks. As we can see here, Actus doesn't heal the target, but still lets them make bonus attacks. Okay, so we've talked through Mephiston's kit and showcased his abilities. On this slide, I have listed his stats and abilities for each of the thresholds for Guild War. Level 50 for Legendary, level 35 for Epic, and level 26 for Rare. Feel free to pause this slide and take notes or screenshots if you'd like. The character is summarized on screen in my usual infographic style. His numbers on the right are at Diamond 3. Tawin, Tacticus Ambassador and Friend, has run those comparatively against the existing characters. His health stat is at the 77th centile, and his armor stat is at the 64th centile. Against a standardized enemy, Mephiston is in the 96th centile in melee and 45th centile at range. I suppose that leads us to think about where the character is useful, or where Mephiston might shine. The first place to start discussions is guild raids. As a Psyker, the obvious role is within the Psyker team. Just using his passive ability and normal attack, Mephiston should be able to add 2 stacks of Neuroparasite in a single turn. As you can see in this clip, if you use Mephiston's active to move him around, then you can also get another stack of psychic damage for a single turn, therefore adding 3 Neuroparasite stacks for 1 round of combat. So he's a reasonable stacker for Neuroparasite, but beyond that, his damage is fairly anemic. So the question we have to ask is, who would he replace in the Psyker team? I think the avatar of Kain and possibly Mortarion are where you would be looking to use the Psyker team as best in slot at the moment. Against both, Roswitha is hard to displace because of the bonus damage she gives through her active ability. Against Mortarion, she's also an excellent damage dealer. Yazagor gives you 2 things: an extra hit with a Neurothrope, doubling your damage dealt for a turn, and also adding Neuroparasite stacks when Yazagor is adjacent to Abraxas. Ahriman's 50% damage boost is also hard to beat, especially as it stacks multiplicatively with Roswitha's damage modifier. So I suppose you could potentially argue that Mephiston might be better than Abraxas at stacking Neuroparasite. The reservation I have is that this will rely on Mephiston being in melee every turn, which isn't always that realistic, especially against bosses like Mortarion. I don't want to write Mephiston off completely in this regard, and there is certainly some testing or scope for inclusion, especially as legendary release event characters are a bit easier to unlock than characters who you have to farm through campaigns, like Ahriman. What about outside of guild raids? In war, he's going to have the potential to counter healing teams, which will be useful given how powerful healers are in that game mode. His active is also pretty unique in its ability to extend unit movement. I know I keep going back to Ragnar and aun'shi, but that is because they form the best team in PvP by a significant margin. Imagine if you added Mephiston to a team of Ragnar, aun'shi, and Karn. You can move him 2 hexes and then teleport Karn forward. This would effectively give Karn a reach of 7 hexes on turn 1. It just gets sillier and sillier, and unless something changes, PvP is going to become a game mode where whoever goes first wins. Mephiston also has some fun usability with Abraxas and Yazagor. You can use him to teleport Abraxas, and therefore there is potential for 3 summon chains in a single turn. His active is pretty versatile, and the extra movement from it opens up a lot of different combinations and possibilities with characters that would otherwise be restricted by poor base movement. I don't think Mephiston is going to have the same individual power level as other legendaries like Karn and Ragnar. I would probably liken him more to characters like aun'shi, who doesn't have amazing power on his own, but is a very useful enabler and utility character. Obviously, Mephiston's power level and value might go up even more depending on who else we end up getting as Blood Angels. I'll maybe sign off there. Hopefully you found that all useful. I've left Aernz' referral code here on screen. He is a Tacticus ambassador and friend and invaluable to me as I put out content. Supporting him supports me and also earns you 100 Blackstone. It is single use though, so choose who you support carefully. Bye. Bye for now.
Doo-doo-dee. It's Nandi.